first part on your second sheet here, at the top, there are some little circles and it says pairs of complementary colors. So we're going to go ahead and fill in the circles there with some sets of complementary colors. All right. So remember, the complements are the ones that are straight across from each other on the color wheel. All right. And they're the colors that are going to have the most contrast if you put them together. So it's almost like, because they're opposites, it's like the colors are going to sort of fight with each other almost. Okay. So if you put those two colors right next to each other in your artwork, it's really going to make them stand out. They're going to contrast a lot and make that part of your artwork stand out. Okay. So it doesn't matter on your sheet what order you put the colors in. So you can put them in whichever little circles you want, but just make sure that you have the two colors that are complements together. All right. So I would pick the easy ones to do. So orange and blue, green and red, and then yellow and violet or purple. Okay. If you wanted to be super fancy, you could do complementary tertiary colors and do like yellow, orange, and blue, violet. All right. But that's a little bit more complicated. All right. So I'm going to switch to my paper so that you can see on my paper. All right, so again, it doesn't matter what order you put them in up here. Okay, I'm gonna zoom in so you can see a little better. Get my paper out of the way. Okay. All right, so my first set that I'm going to do red and green. All right, my green is really light. So remember, the more water you have with your watercolors, the lighter the color is going to be. That's a little better. All right, and then do orange and blue. And then the last set is going to be yellow and violet or purple. All right. And again, on the screen, it looks kind of blue. I promise it's really purple. All right, so red and green, orange and blue, yellow and purple or violet. Okay. And you can see, like, when you look at those two colors together, they really stand out. It's kind of like they clash a little bit with each other. All right, are we good on that part? I'm going to go back to the notes in Canvas, and we're going to fill in our blanks here a little bit. All right, so in terms of other color schemes, like combinations of colors, okay, that we talked about yesterday, we went over monochromatic, right? Remember, the mono means one, and the chroma part is color. So it means you're just using one color and kind of all of its different shades and tints. Okay. We talked about warm and cool colors and how it's kind of like half and half on the color wheel. And then we talked about analogous colors, which were the ones that were right next to each other on the color wheel. Okay. And we'll go back. You've got a space to fill in analogous colors on the bottom of your sheet. We'll go back and do that at a little bit later at the end. Okay, so we're gonna skip those circles at the bottom for now, but we'll get back. All right, so analogous colors are next to each other. All right, so color has three different properties. So these are the three important words, and they are hue, H-U-E, value, and intensity. All right. The blanks in the next section on your sheet are not quite in order, so we're going to skip around just a little bit. Okay. So hue is basically like the fancy word for the name of the color. All right. So red is a hue. Blue is a hue, all right? It's like the name of the color, all right? So it's kind of like the third blank down on your paper. It says the color's name, such as red or violet, is called the hue, H-U-E. Okay? So third blank down, the color's name is the hue. All right, so value is basically how light or dark the color is. So we talked about value when we were doing all of the shading stuff, right? So it's the same thing, whether you're doing it with a pencil or with paint or something else that's a different color, okay? So how dark or light it is the value. So that is the next blank after hue on your sheet. It says the blank of a color refers to how light or dark it is. That should be value. All right. Now this part, it's a little bit confusing sometimes because a lot of times when people who aren't artists talk about colors, they talk about like lots of different shades of blue, or you talk about getting your car windows tinted or that kind of thing, okay? So the way that people use these words in not an art context is not quite what they actually mean in art, all right? So technically, in art, when you add white to a color, that is called a tint, all right? So that's the very first blank on your paper. It says when you add white to a color, it's called a tint. All right. And it's basically, I think the reason why people talk about like tinting car windows, it's like you're making the window have just a little bit of color. All right. If you have a lot of white in something, it's going to have just a little bit of color. It's like just a little bit that color. Okay, so when you put white in, you get a tint. So as an example, pink is a tint of red. If you mix red and white together, you get pink. So pink is a tint of red. All right, now when you add black to a color to make it darker, that is called a shade. All right, so this is the second blank. When you add black to a color, it's called a shade. All right, so navy blue, like really dark blue, is a shade of blue because it's darker. All right, so far on our paper in the blanks, we should have tint, shade, hue, and then value. All right, it was a little bit out of order, but that's what it should say so far. Okay. All right, and then the last blank there is going to be intensity. All right, so the intensity of the color is like the saturation of the color, like how bright the color is, how intense it is. All right, so the intensity of a color refers to how bright or dull it is. So on all of these lovely gradient things here, right? The ends of the gradient have more intensity than the middle parts where the colors are mixing together, because it's like the color is brighter on the ends. So this is more intense. It has more intensity than like this color over here. All right. As another example, like neon pink has more intensity than like pastel baby pink. Okay. All right. So your blanks should say on your sheet, tint, shade, hue, value, and then intensity. All right, everybody good? So what we're gonna do, the next part, there's that big rectangle on your paper, okay? And what we're gonna do is we're gonna blend two complementary colors together. So you're gonna make it look kind of like one of these gradients that's on here, all right? So this is like what we're aiming for. I'm going to switch back to my paper so you can see kind of how to do it, okay? So, switch screens. All right, so you can choose for yours any set of complementary colors that you want. So basically you're going to pick out one of your little pairs from up here at the top, all right? And you're going to start with one color on one end and go this way, and then start with the other color on the other end and go the opposite way. All right. And I'm going to show you how to do it with the watercolors. There's a couple of tricks to sort of make it easier. And I'll kind of talk about if you're using colored pencils or that sort of thing, like what to do with those. All right, so on mine, I'm gonna do red and green because I think the colors are gonna show up the best on the screen here, okay? All right, so what I want to do first is I'm gonna use the lid of my paint set to actually mix colors and kind of get my color ready, because the one thing, this is a bigger area than like these little tiny circles that we were painting in, okay? So I wanna make sure that I have enough paint to sort of fill in this area. And the one thing about just kind of like dipping your brush in the paint over here is sometimes, depending on how much water you have over here and how much water's on your brush and how long it's been sitting there and that sort of thing, the color can come out lighter or darker, and it's not always the same every time you put your brush in the paint, all right? So what I want to do, because I think I'm gonna need sort of more than one paintbrush full, all right, to paint this in. I wanna get my color ready over here first, so I have like a consistent color, so it stays the same the whole time that I'm trying to use it, all right? All right, so I'm going to clean off the lid a spot here because this was kind of mixed up. So remember to clean off your paint box lid if you have paint on it. Dip your brush in the water and then get this wet again. So it reactivates the paint, and then use like a paper towel or a napkin to dry it off and clean it off. Okay. All right, so what I want to do to make sure that I have a more consistent color is I'm going to put some red on the lid of my paint box. So I'm just putting some water there first so that I can kind of have more paint. And then I'm going to put some red in it. All right, so what I want to do when I paint here is I'm going to start out at this end with the red. Sorry, water's in the way. I'm going to start out at this end with the red, and I want the red to kind of like fade out as it goes across over here. So it's like that value scale that we did where we were trying to make it be a gradient and get gradually lighter as it went across. All right. If you're doing this with colored pencils or crayons, that's basically what you're aiming for. So you're going to start with the one color. All right. You're going to color really dark over here, and you're going to gradually color lighter and lighter and lighter as you go. Okay. You want to stop probably about 3/4 of the way across. So stop here, because you want the other end to be just the other color that you're going to use without it being mixed together. All right. All right. So the trick with the watercolors to help it blend across is I'm going to start out with my paint at this end. And I'm going to sort of paint it in a little ways. And then to help it blend, I'm going to dip my brush in the water and just use water. So I'm going to fill in this part with just water. And again, I'm going about 3/4 of the way across. I stopped right about here because I want the other end to be green. Okay. So once I have the water on there, then I can put a little bit more color if I need to and kind of like blend it across a little bit more. All right, and it's going to be a little bit weird on this paper because this is copier paper and not actually painting paper. Okay, so it may not look totally smooth. That's okay. All right, so once I have that part, again, I'm trying to make it be really intense over here, really dark over here, and kind of fade out as it goes across. All right, and then I'm going to get, so the complement of red is green. So I'm going to get some green paint on my paint box lid too, because I want it to be a consistent color. Trying to make it a little bit darker. I had a lot of water to start with. There we go. All right, and then I'm going to start at the other end with the green, and I'm basically doing the same thing where I want it to be green over here. And if you do this fairly quickly while this is still wet, all right, it will kind of automatically blend together. Okay, so you might not need the extra water to spread it out, but you got to work a little bit fast. All right, so I'm making sure I want my colors to overlap in the middle, like I'm painting green on top of the red. And I'm gonna go to about 3/4 of the way across on it. All right, so what you should end up with, kind of reflecting the light a little bit here. It's a little hard to see. All right, so what you should end up with is in the middle where the two colors mix together pretty evenly, it should look kind of brown. Okay, so you should end up with kind of like brown in the middle, right? Towards the ends, it's gonna make the color just a little bit darker, all right? So this is kind of the useful thing about complementary colors and why it's helpful to know what a color's complement is, okay? Because there's a couple of ways to make colors darker when you paint. The obvious one is you put black in with the color and it makes it get really, really dark really fast, okay? But you might want a color to just be a little bit darker. And if you want that, a better way to make it darker is to mix it with its complement, all right? So as an example, I'm gonna use my green that's over here, all right? If I mix black in with my green, all right, I get sort of this really dark color, okay? Which I might want for some things, all right? But maybe I just don't want it to be quite such a bright, all right? Then what I could do instead of mixing black in is I could take some red and I could mix some red in with the green. Might need a little bit more green. All right, so if you mix equal amounts, you get brown. I used up part of my green with the other part. Didn't have enough. All right, but if you mix just a little bit of, like a little bit of red in with the green, you'll get a darker green. So you see the difference between like the one that I made with the black and then the one that I made with the complement instead. Okay, it's darker, but it's not quite so gray looking on there. All right, so it would do the same thing. Like if I was trying to make darker red, I could take a little bit of my green and put it in the red. And then I've got like a maroon kind of color there. Okay, so this is the other reason why complementary colors are useful, right? They can help you mix darker versions, like shades of the colors that you're trying to make, okay? All right, so if you do have this extra space at the bottom of your paper, if you want to try mixing different colors and see sort of what happens and what colors you make, you can try things out and experiment on the bottom of your page here a little bit, all right? All right, so the last part that we need to fill in, and then you'll have time to play with stuff, is the analogous colors here, okay? So you're gonna do 2 sets of analogous colors. Remember, analogous colors are ones that are next to each other on the color wheel. So ones that are right in a row touching each other, all right? So you are probably going to have to mix some things to get like the intermediate colors, unless you've got one of the paint sets with lots of colors in it, okay? So you could pick out 3 colors. It does not matter which 3 you pick, but you do want them to be all right next to each other, like touching each other, okay? So don't skip colors. You can't do violet, blue, and green, all right? You got to have some of those intermediate colors in there too, all right? All right, so you're going to pick out, you're going to do 1 set here and then 1 set here. I'm going to do, I have some red violet mixed up over here, so I'm going to use that as part of one of mine. All right, so if I've got red violet, the things on either side of red violet are red and violet. All right, and then I think for my other one, I'm gonna do yellow and green and yellow green in the middle. Yellow, green. And I need to mix those 2 together to get the middle color. All right, so that should be all of the parts that you need to fill out on your sheets, okay? Again, you can use the bottom space down here for experiments, like if you want to try mixing colors or make yourself a little painting or whatever, okay? For some things with color theory and making different colors, sometimes it's helpful just to try it out and see what you get, like experiment a little bit with it. All right.